Hi, what's happening? Y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and man, this is going to be a very fun breakdown video. I can't wait to dive into this one, man. So apparently, the 2024 NFL cap space has an unprecedented increase by $30 million. We're going to talk about what the cap space now officially is all across the NFL, how much it actually increased by as far as effective cap space and things like that. And also, Brad Spielberger predicts that the Washington Commanders are going to spend the most money in free agency. So of course I got to give y'all the updated Washington Commanders cap space. I got to give you the cap space rankings, the fact that we're still #1, but by how much of a gap. And of course, going back to Brad Spielberger, we got to talk about why this is actually possible and why this may actually not play out the way that he thinks, with him predicting us to spend the most money in free agency out of all NFL teams, which will be really exciting. So are we potentially headed to some big free agency shopping for the Commanders? Super excited about that. Of course, we're going to do a full breakdown as to why this unexpected salary cap increase actually hurts the Commanders. I know a lot of people are excited in hearing, more money. I'm going to break down as well as I can why this actually technically hurts us. Also, are the Commanders going to be big spenders March 11th at the start of the legal tampering period? Are we going to hit the ground running? Also, we're going to talk about some potential Commanders cap cuts. Like if we want to get even more 2024 cap space, we're going to break down which players are the most likely to get cut and how much we would save to end up cutting those guys and all of that type of stuff. And then, of course, we got to take a look at a lot of the potential cuts that may happen around the NFL. Some guys that even when you're looking at free agency rankings right now of all of the top available free agents at different position groups and things like that, we're going to dive into some of the players that are not available yet, that are not on those lists yet because they're still currently with their team. But we're going to look at different situations and be like, well, they're in the negative, so they're probably going to have to cut this great player here just to get from being in the negative. So we're going to dive into all of that and more. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release the informative and opinionated videos just like this one. Make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content, man. I'm super excited. I have mock drafts. I have so much information, so many fun topic videos like this one. Even before this the salary cap is officially set at this that just came out this morning, I was already working on this video. I just had to add that part to it. This is one of the videos that I was already working on, that I was already having fun breaking down. And I have other videos like that I'm already working on, so stay tuned. We have a lot of really interesting topics on the way, but I don't want to waste even more of y'all time with the intro. We're already almost 4 minutes in, so let's go ahead and get to it, man. Let's get it. All right, so last year's cap space for the entire NFL, each team had $224.8 million. And there were predictions days ago that it would increase to somewhere up to like $250 million. Now it's set at a record-breaking $255 million. Like, business is booming in the NFL, y'all. This is a huge jump from the previous season. A $30 million increase in 1 year is crazy, y'all. I don't think y'all understand. That's absolutely insane. Again, NFL business is booming. But shouts out to Nikki Javala for pointing this out. This came directly from the NFL. The unprecedented $30 million increase per club in this year's salary cap is the result of the full repayment of all amounts advanced by the clubs and deferred by the players during the COVID pandemic, as well as an extraordinary increase in media revenue for the 2024 season. So this is coming for basically 3 different reasons. All of that is basically saying that, remember during the COVID season, everybody kind of took like pay cuts, like the owners took a little bit of pay cuts for them teams, the players took some slight pay cuts, and they were like, hey man, just in case things get ugly, just in case we don't bounce back as quickly as we actually ended up bouncing back in reality. You know, hindsight is 2020, but back then it was like, we don't know when this thing is going to bounce back, if this virus may actually take us out or anything, or it will delay things further than what it ended up being delayed. So they were like, all right, let's just take a step back. Let's just kind of save, you know, just in case for the future things can get ugly. Let's basically put some money to the side. Now that the NFL is basically back on track like nothing ever happened, they're like, all right, let's get that money back. All of that money we put into that little imaginary savings account, we're bringing that out and putting that to use now. And then the third thing is the fact that media revenue has increased, because now you got Amazon, you got all these different networks fighting over the chance to basically stream NFL games, the rights over to streaming them and things like that. And they're just basically outbidding each other, and the price just keeps going up and up and up. And Roger Goodell and the NFL are just sitting there smiling, all of the NFL owners, because they're like, hey man, the more y'all argue, the more money to our pocket. So this is a big increase for several reasons, and I just wanted to break that down to y'all exactly how this happened, because that was my first thought. I was like, okay, we have this big increase that people didn't expect. Where did it come from? There you go. Now, it depends on where you're looking at. I think most people reference over the cap. Over the cap has us now at $87 million worth of cap space. No matter where you look, we're number one in cap space. But if you're looking at over the cap, we have a less than $5 million gap over the guys in second place, who are the New England Patriots. They have $82 million. But if you're looking at Spot Track, we have almost a $10 million gap between us and the second place New England Patriots. Now, regardless of what's going on, we have the most cap space in the NFL, and that matters. That's very important. I'm very excited about that. Do not get me wrong. But we're going to talk about how relatively plays into this, and basically how this unexpected increase, if anything, actually hurts us. But just going back to over the cap, if you're looking at it, we have 87 million. The Patriots have 83 million. If you're looking at Spot Track, we have 96 million. The Patriots have 87 million. So it just depends on which one you want to look at. Of course, me being a Commanders fan and me wanting to be as excited as I could possibly be, I want to believe in Spot Track. I really do, because when you look at over the cap, and this is who most people reference, so maybe this is the more realistic one, but again, the salary cap difference between us and the Patriots is definitely smaller there. And also, when you're looking at effective cap space, we have 75 million compared to the Patriots 74 million, so that decreases the gap even more there. So it just depends on which way you want to look at it. But regardless, no matter what's happening, we're number one in cap space, we're number one in spendable money. So if we want to be big spenders, we can do that. And we're going to talk about that a little later when we get to the Brad Spielberger part of this video. This video, now that I'm thinking about it and looking at everything, this is probably going to end up being somewhere north of 40 minutes, maybe even 50 minutes. We'll see, because we have a lot to dive into, man. We're not going to get to the Brad Spielberger part really anytime soon. So let's go ahead and get into this first part, because I feel like a lot of people are kind of missing the point here, especially from the Commanders' point of view. To be completely honest, I don't know if anybody else has really noticed this, but cap space is really the battle of the relative. Now that there is more cash available, players are only going to want bigger contracts because more cash is available. It's all about relativity. You're going to hear me say relative and relativity a lot for like the next 10-15 minutes. So brace yourself, because players are more so focused on, of course, the market value and resetting the market more than anything else, but also percentages. This is a percentage game. That's why we're talking about relativity. There's no way agents and players don't look at this situation of having more money to spend in any way other than having more money to spend. Like, everybody's just gonna basically want their cut of this increase. If you really think about it, it's a market for a reason. So yeah, more cap space sounds good on the surface. It's cute, you know what I'm saying? Something fun to talk about, but it doesn't actually help as much as a lot of people probably think it does, especially when we're specifically talking the Commanders. Other NFL teams, we're gonna get into that, but just think about like how with us gaining an additional $30 million compared to next year, think about how that doesn't necessarily mean now that we can get Brian Burns for free. Like, oh, hey, free $30 million. Let's just go get Brian Burns. It really just means that a guy like Brian Burns is now going to expect even more money in his upcoming contract before this announcement of an increase of $30 million. Same for the players that the Commanders may want to re-sign. If you're looking at guys like a Cameron Curl, a Kendall Fuller, and all of that type of stuff, I know a lot of people here, ooh, we have an extra $30 million. So that should be just Curtis Samuel, Kendall Fuller. You're just going down a grocery list of players. Okay, we'll just spend that extra 30 that just fell out of the sky on those guys, but it doesn't work like that. That's not exactly how this is going. Now, those guys will be asking for more money than they were originally planning on asking for. Because even if they don't think about it, their agents will. I guarantee you that. There's no way this increase doesn't spark the idea in most, if not all players, to be like, you know what? They got more money to spend. Now that's more money for me to go get. Also, Now to dive into why, as a Commanders fan, I'm actually a little annoyed and upset about this salary cap increase, because going back to relativity, having the most cap space in the NFL is just that no matter what. So I'm excited about that. But with more cap space, one, teams that were in the negative are now closer to getting out of it, like the Cowboys for say. So this helps them relatively more than it helps us. And then point number two, like I've already said, agents and players see more money available as more money we can ask for. So ultimately, we will probably end up signing the same exact guys we naturally would have. So that's really what a market is. It's all relative. If we were planning on signing, say, player A, player B, player C to a certain amount of money, now with this increase, we're probably going to still end up signing those exact same players, but to just a little bit more money each. That's basically how it works. Now, granted, maybe some teams, and hopefully we're one of them, that can find a way to finesse the situation, but just in general, I'm breaking this down in general. Of course, there's going to be the teams that actually somehow take advantage of the salary cap increase, but we're talking about in general, we're talking about relatively, when we're talking about a market, this isn't as beneficial as people think. So again, as a selfish Commanders fan, competitive advantage wise, this increase benefits us way less than it benefits a lot of other NFL teams. The team benefiting the most is actually the team at the very bottom of the cap space rankings. And it becomes less and less beneficial as you go up and climb those cap space rankings to the point where you get to us, and we're technically benefiting the least out of all 32 NFL teams. I feel like a great way to give it a different view is basically imagine if you have like $100 and somebody gave you a free $5 that you weren't expecting. And then compare that to if you have $0 and you also owed somebody $2. So you're technically negative $2, and then somebody pulled up and gave you that $5 for free. So like naturally with that second scenario, you're far more excited. You're far more like, okay, we're good to go. Whereas the guy with $100, like, you're like, yeah, thanks. That's cool. But you know, it's not relatively, the person with negative $2 benefits far more than the person that already had 100. So don't get me wrong. Having the most cap space in the NFL is still king. I'm not taking nothing away from that. Again, I'm very excited and I'm proud of the fact that we have the most cap space in the NFL. But this increase specifically, this unexpected increase that we're talking about today, is not very beneficial to the Commanders, and relatively wise, it actually hurts us because it helps our competitors and our rivals more than it helps us, which ultimately hurts the Commanders, basically. Best way to put it. Also, another note on relativity and why it's so important, let's just do it from a different view. Think about the draft, because technically in the draft, everybody, or at the very least, most teams all get better after an NFL draft because you're adding talent. But what matters most is relativity. When we're talking about who had the best drafts, it's comparing one team to other teams, saying that that team improved by a larger margin than the other teams improved. Technically, everybody improved in a way, but who improved the most? Relativity is king in any market with limited resources. The NFL not only has a draft with limited picks, but more relevant to today's video and topic, the NFL also has a salary cap. There is a cap on the cap space. If there was no cap or a limit to how much money teams could actually spend, then having the most money does have maximum value then. That's why, like soccer leagues with no cap space, the teams with the most money dominate. But when there's a salary cap, the NFL's like, no, we don't want that. We want balance. So everything is relative. Everything is percentages. When you think about a market, in our case, your league is basically telling you that you can only spend a certain amount of money. So having the most money to spend in a salary cap loses its biggest advantage and forces everything to be relative, basically. Again, we don't lose all advantages. I'm not saying that at all. Again, having the most salary cap in the NFL, I'm going to keep saying it. It does matter, and I'm very excited about it. But this increase specifically is not as beneficial as a lot of y'all think. And to even add to my point, with an unexpected salary cap increase, this also leads to an unexpected franchise tag price increase. It's all relative. More money to spend equals more money you have to spend or will spend. It's not like you're just going to have money left over now. The market is still the market. It's all based on percentages. Like when you're looking at the new franchise tag prices now, quarterbacks now, if you franchise tag them, will make $38.3 million in 2024. Same running back, 11.9. Wide receiver, 21.8. Tight end, 12.7. Offensive lineman, 20.9. Really 21. Defensive end, 21.3. Defensive tackle, 22. That's actually interesting that defensive tackles more expensive than defensive end. Linebacker, 24. Cornerback, 19.8. Safety, 17.1. And kicker, 5.9. And then when you're talking about transition tags, it's a whole nother list of prices. We don't necessarily got to dive into that because teams rarely do transition tags. I just wanted to point out franchise tags. And before this unexpected increase, those numbers that I just gave you were smaller. They were still big, but they were smaller relative to what they are now. This unexpected increase in salary cap also means unexpected increase in price, which you got to pay franchise tag players. Again, it's all relative. They're all related. It's all percentages. So take that concept and basically apply it to everything salary cap related. Basically what we just talked about with the franchise tag. Oh, you got more money to spend? Well, to us on our end, that just means you literally just have more money to spend. You're gonna spend it. So take that from the franchise tag thing we just talked about and basically apply it everywhere. With more money comes a bigger cost. Basically, that's all it really is, which essentially puts us back to where we were before this unexpected increase. So I can understand why fans of teams at the very bottom, like the Buffalo Bills, the Saints, Dolphins, Chargers, Broncos, Browns, and the Cowboys, who have negative cap space, are very excited about this. Or even the 49ers, who used to have negative cap space, and now they're barely positive because of this increase. Again, relatively, these guys are throwing a parade over this increase, whereas us Commanders fans, yeah, this is nice, but we don't gain as much as y'all do. So this is, yeah, of course, any increase in salary cap, any increase in money that you can spend is a good thing. I'm not saying it's not, but we're not as happy as Cowboys fans are right now. Those guys are like, whoo, we needed that. Whereas us Commanders fans are like, yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's nice. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's the biggest difference that I'm trying to point out. Now, moving on from that breakdown, let's talk about how the Washington Commanders can potentially gain even more money. Who are some potential Washington Commanders cap cuts? Well, let me go ahead and get this out the way. I highly doubt that Jonathan Allen is getting moved either by trade or especially release. I think that's like the last potential option. But if you wanted to, his salary cap hit is $21.4 million. If you were to cut him, he would be $12 million worth of dead cap this season, plus $6 million next season in dead cap. But essentially, you could add an additional $9 million to the cap space that we already have, which is league leading. Again, that's big. I love that. So if for some crazy reason Jonathan Allen leaves the Commanders, trade, release, whatever, we can save an additional $9 million worth of cap space, but that's not worth it. Whatever player you would get with that extra $9 million wouldn't be worth the impact that a Jonathan Allen will have on your team. Saving $9 million worth of cap space is nowhere near enough to get rid of a guy that great. But then you get to guys like Charles Leno. You cut him, you save $7.2 million worth of cap space because he's right now a $15.5 million cap hit, but he's an $8.3 million dead cap when you cut him, which kind of sucks. That's a lot of dead cap, but relatively, you end up saving $7.2 million to your cap space if you want to do that. And if we plan on really going heavy into building this offensive line and improving that draft free agency, if you want that additional $7.2 million, is right there. Then Logan Thomas, same thing. He's an $8.3 million cap hit. If you were to cut him, he would still stick around for $1.8 million worth of dead cap, but you essentially save $6.5 million. And who couldn't use an additional $6.5 million? And with them aging, with him getting hurt every now and then, I'm going to keep saying it. I love Logan Thomas, but once he gets a certain amount of targets, it's like he's just destined to fumble the ball. And I can see Cliff Kingsbury and all of these guys wanting to get some younger talent or even develop a lot of the young talent that we already have. Maybe even go get like a Dalton Schultz in free agency or whatever. And if you want an additional $6.5 million worth of cap space to play with, you can easily cut Logan Thomas and keep it pushing. And hey, man, a lot of people may not like this, but Punter Way, he's a $3.8 million cap hit right now. You cut him, he's only a $600K dead cap. So you would essentially save $3.2 million if you were to do that. Now, granted, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, like, hey, I mean, maybe ask him to restructure potentially and ask him to just basically eat up a little bit less cap space and keep him. That's a thing. But just to rank them in order of what's most likely, I think Logan Thomas, his scenario, him becoming a cap cut, is pretty likely. I think Charles Leno is less likely, but still likely. I think those two are your biggest cap cut potential guys. And then Jonathan Allen and Tress Way, I feel like are highly unlikely. On the Tress Way end, though, I more so feel like you're just not saving enough money for it to make sense. And Jonathan Allen, I just straight up ignoring cap space, ignoring cap hit, all of that. I just think that he's such a great player that you don't move on from him unless he just wants out completely. And he already said it himself that he was really just heated about how much we were losing when he said that he thought 1,000% thought about being traded. And basically now with the new regime and things like that, he's very excited with the direction that this team is going in. He's not trying to jump ship to go to an immediate Super Bowl contender. So he's sticking around. He's really good. No point of even really discussing Jonathan Allen, but y'all know me, man. I'm very thorough with my work. So I got to talk about everybody, even the guys that don't even necessarily make sense. But hey, man, don't sleep on Tress Way in his situation and assume that he's just super safe. I think he's safe, but you never know. Larry Izzo may prefer to bring in his own guy. Not very likely, but definitely not as impossible as most people probably think. A lot of people feel like Tress Way is just an automatic lock to be on this team next year. I wouldn't go that far. Again, I don't think it's likely that we move on from him, that we cut him or whatever, but I just want you to know that he doesn't have a secure locked seat on this Commanders roster going into 2024. And Chris Cooley also brings up some interesting stats. I love Tress Way, but Chris Cooley brings up some great points. Going to his tweet, cutting Tress Way would save you around $3.1, $3.2 million worth of cap space. In Way's 2023 stats and rankings among 33 punters, yards per attempt 46 yards, that's 25th. Hang time average 4.3 seconds, that's 16th. That's better, but then punting grade, he was 31st according to Pro Football Focus with a 50.7. Way currently has the 4th highest cap hit amongst punters in 2024 as well. So if he's somewhere in the middle, at best 16th at what he's doing in a lot of different categories, but even some other categories he's 25th, and he's out here being paid like the 4th best. I mean, I can see how, again, going back to relativity, if you're paying a guy the 4th most money, but he's at best the 16th best guy doing it, there's a big gap in relativity right there. That's somebody you would typically move on from. But maybe I'm biased. I like Tress Way. I'm cool with keeping him. I think he's still pretty underrated, and I think Larry Izzo could come in and fix a lot of the reasons why Tress Way was not, you know, statistically doing too well last year. I still think the talent is there, but hey, man, Chris Cooley's bringing up some points because he also goes on to say that this wasn't even a down year for Tress Way. His stats and rankings in 2022 were almost identical. He continued to say, I'm sure this will make people mad, but he's been below average for a while now, yet he is paid as a top 5 punter. Heading into a rebuild, they should probably look for a cheaper option. He brings up great points. Now, I hope that we do keep Tress Way, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that if we move on from Tress Way, if this next regime, Larry Izzo, our special teams coordinator, John Glenn, our assistant special teams coach, Dan Quinn, the head coach, Adam Peters, between Eugene Shin, between those combinations of people, if they decide to move on from Tress Way, I'm just giving you the heads up as to why it may happen. Again, I'm hoping it doesn't, but if it does, if we look back 3 months from now and Tress Way is not on the Commanders 2024 roster, this is why. So shouts out to Chris Cooley for that. Now moving on to the Brad Spielberger part of the video, and this is probably going to be relatively quick, going back to the word relative, but this is going to be quick compared to like other parts of the video, because he predicts that the Commanders will spend the most money in the 2024 NFL free agency that's coming up in less than a month. He was on the NFL Stock Exchange with Trevor Sycamore when he said it, and he cited the fact that Josh Harris will want to turn this team around very quickly to win this fan base back while on the way to building a new stadium. He also cited new owner syndrome, but I do want to point out the fact that even though I do agree that there is a chance that we could be the biggest spenders, even just off the logic that we have the most money to spend, so it can make sense that we could be. But I don't think Josh Harris will have any effect on what we do in free agency in the draft. Yeah, I know he could potentially want to win back fans as quickly as possible, but if he did have any say in those areas, free agency of the draft, player personnel and all that type of stuff, team building, he would pretty much be Dan Snyder 2.0, and that's literally what we don't want. We just got out of that situation. On his end, he hired the right people to make those decisions, so he wouldn't have to. So the only effect that Josh Harris will have on free agency in the draft was essentially a couple of months ago when he decided to hire Adam Peters, Eugene Shin. Those guys will make the decisions. That's the only influence that Josh Harris will have on who we take in free agency in the draft, just based on the guys that he brought in to do it. So I don't like that as a reason, because that literally sets us back to where we were. And I don't think that necessarily invalidates the chances of the Commanders spending huge money in free agency. I just feel like that's not a good reason to explain why we would if we do. But at the same time, if Adam Peters and Dan Quinn share a vision to turn this team around quickly, like Brad Spielberger said that Josh Harris potentially wants to, then they for sure have the capital to do so. So I just want to basically take the time to push back on why Brad Spielberger said that we would potentially be the biggest spenders in free agency. But I still agree with Brad Spielberger that we could potentially end up spending the most money in free agency. I just feel like it's for a different reason. But boy, I'm excited to hear people that are not Commanders reporters, not Commanders fans, look around the NFL. These guys analyze the entire NFL. This literal podcast, this YouTube video, they're breaking down the entire NFC and what everybody's plans are for agency and draft. What are their priorities in the offseason? Then they did another video like that for the AFC. They cover and pay attention to and analyze, break down all 32 NFL teams. And for a guy that's looked at all 32 NFL teams, this is what he does on a daily basis. For him to say that the Commanders are potentially going to spend the most money in free agency, it sounds like, okay, I believe it. This is not just some random biased Commanders fan, not even a guy like me saying it. This is a neutral analyst that has no bias towards or against the Commanders saying this. So based on logic, based on what he's hearing around the NFL, it sounds like this could be a thing that actually happens. Now let's move on to top NFL free agents that the Commanders would thus have in the most cap space. Who do we want? I mean, at positions of need, I've heard some things about Kirk Cousins. I'm doing a deep dive into that in a separate video, so stay tuned whether Kirk Cousins makes sense for us or not. Of course, you have edge Josh Allen from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've already done a video. I think it was that yesterday? Man, I'm so busy. I'm knocking out so many videos. I don't even remember when it was, but I did a whole franchise tag video literally yesterday or the day before that, whatever, where I'm breaking down which top free agents have the most potential to end up getting franchise tag, who may be out of our reach anyway. And I feel like guys like edge Josh Allen, wide receiver T. Higgins if you want him, edge Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers, a few guys like that, Antoine Winfield, the safety from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are more than likely going to get tagged. So if they do, basically cancel them off your list of available free agents because they're technically not available. But you also have a guy like maybe Jalen Johnson from the Chicago Bears, quite likely to get tagged, but I would love to get him. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed from the Kansas City Chiefs, would love to go get him. Wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., Colts. I feel like all of these guys that we've listed so far are quite likely to get tagged. But then again, like I broke down in that video, how often do tags work out? And I just feel like with teams getting smarter and smarter every year and having more data to back up the reasoning, the logic that franchise tags don't work, dog. You franchise tag them, and how often do franchise tags lead to long-term contracts with that original team, rather than them playing for 1 year on a tag or maybe two and it ended up going elsewhere anyway? The only time franchise tagging a player even makes relative sense is if you're a Super Bowl contender, you just really don't want to lose that elite player. You just want to keep him around one more year at this Super Bowl run. Other than that, franchise tagging players, I just don't see any real benefit. Just the evidence shows that it just doesn't work out long term at all. You're only doing it if you're a Super Bowl contender. You just want to keep this team together at all costs. Like, we do not want to lose this guy. We lose this guy, it makes our Super Bowl contention way less likely. So that's the only other way. Then maybe wide receiver Mike Evans. Hey, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even if you do choose to franchise tag somebody, you can only franchise tag one of them. So, hey, man, Mike Evans and Antoine Winfield, you got to let somebody slip through the cracks, and maybe we can pull up and try to steal one of those guys. Because, Mike Evans would be great, but Antoine Winfield would be perfect. Oh, boy. I love Mike Evans. He's a great receiver. I feel like he's still very underrated. And we do it would be nice to get some better receivers in the room, especially in a Cliff Kingsbury pass-heavy offense. But what Antoine Winfield could do in this defense? Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr., Jason Simmons? Come on, dog. That would honestly potentially be like the biggest free agent signing we could do. Between him or Josh Allen or Brian Burns, I feel like those are the top 3 home runs if we could potentially hire them. But for reasons I've already explained, quite likely to get franchise tagged. Tyron Smith, the tackle from the Dallas Cowboys. maybe a franchise tag candidate, but a lot of people are saying that maybe they'll end up franchise tagging like a Tony Pollard, which means Tyron Smith may end up actually being available in free agency. Do we want to go get him? And then you also have a guy like Bryce Huff from the New York Jets. Maybe they don't franchise tag him. He could potentially be a cheaper option on the edge outside of like a Brian Burns or Josh Allen. You know, there's a lot of options out there. Kyle Duggar, the safety from the New England Patriots. I'm doing a specific video breakdown on him. So that's one of my fun videos that I'm working on, where we're spending a whole video diving into Kyle Duggar and why he makes sense for the Commanders. And you also have Commanders free agents on top free agents list. You have Cameron Curl, you have Kendall Fuller, and I've already talked about in my franchise tag video that I did yesterday or whenever I did it, that is very unlikely for the Commanders to franchise tag anybody, specifically either of those two players I just named in Kendall Fuller and Cameron Curl. So we'll see if we end up re-signing them or not. But for the point that I'm bringing up, I mean, it's franchise tags are options, but I just don't think teams are really going to use them to the extent that a lot of people probably think they will. Now, Josh Allen and Brian Burns, we'll talk. You know, I'm doing a whole Brian Burns video in itself as well, and that's one of my priorities. Out of all of the videos that I'm doing, like Kirk Cousins and Tony Pollard and Kyle Duggar, I'm doing videos for individual players and deep dives into why, like how us signing them could potentially make sense and things like that. I feel like the Brian Burns one is the most interesting, and that's the one I put the most work, time, and research into. So stay tuned for that. Be on the lookout for that. And his situation is really interesting. And in that video, I'm going to talk about why he may actually be more likely available than we think in free agency. But either way, these guys, I mean, their teams feel like they probably need them. So they're quite likely to get franchise tag, especially like a Josh Allen from the Jaguars. So, you know, it's nice to get excited. It's nice to be optimistic, but I just don't think we really have much of a chance. But if those guys do hit free agency, if they don't get franchise tag, because again, like I've explained, franchise tagging players doesn't necessarily work out long term, and the Panthers are definitely not Super Bowl contenders right now with Brian Burns, even if they do bring him back. And even the Jaguars, I mean, they're pretty good, but Josh Allen, keeping them doesn't make them Super Bowl contenders going into next year unless they just have a ridiculous free agency and draft. So neither of those teams, I mean, yeah, franchise tagging one of your best players potentially leaving, I can see why you would want to, but ultimately they're probably going to end up leaving in a couple of years or so. And I just feel like NFL teams at this point have the foresight to see that, based on the several years of evidence that we've had with teams using franchise tags, that maybe they just go ahead and be like, you know what? We'll just go try to find another guy like that in the draft or something like that, and just lets them walk. We'll see. But I think odds are they're more than likely to end up getting franchise tags. So I'm saying all of that to say that, hey, just go ahead and wipe them off of your free agency grocery list, your shopping list, because it's quite likely that we don't even get a chance to get them. But like I was saying, if they are available, we have the most money in cap space. So I would give us pretty high odds of potentially landing those guys based on the mix of this is our biggest need, and we also have the most money to spend in cap space. So come on down. Then, of course, you even have a guy like edge rusher Chase Young. I've already explained in another video, like a nice little deep dive for like 5 to 10 minutes as to why it wouldn't make sense for either party involved, Chase Young or the Commanders. But that's the guy that's available technically. Running back Saquon Barkley from the Giants, I'm good. He's going to ask for way too much money. And, you know, Asian running backs are never a good idea to pay big money, but he's still a guy. And then I'm also working on a video breaking down NFL free agents in this 2024 free agency cycle that are coming from teams that we have coaches from. So we have ex-Seattle Seahawks coaches, we have ex-Dallas Cowboys coaches as well. We have a few, like when we really dive into it, I'm doing one video for defense, one video for offense, free agents that we may quite likely take a look at and potentially sign in free agency just because of our connection to those guys from our coaches that are now hired for the Commanders but previously worked with the teams that those guys are coming from. And that idea just popped up into my head because you also have cornerback Stephon Gilmore from the Cowboys. Maybe we go get him, and maybe he, even himself, prefers to stick with Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn more than he cares about the Cowboys. Maybe it's more of a Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr. thing than it is a Dallas Cowboys thing, and maybe he's like, I want to keep playing for those guys. Those guys had me balling out. When people were starting to give up on me and thinking that I was too old and I'm losing my touch, those guys still had me out here looking really good. And maybe he realizes that and is like, yeah, I'll prefer to go follow them where I go. So it's quite likely that guys like Stephon Gilmore will probably follow Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. to the Commanders. And again, that's why I'm doing video breakdowns for both defense and offense for all of the teams that our Commanders coaches have connections to, especially like the 49ers with Anthony Lynn and Adam Peters is our GM. You know, we're going to take a look at some of the players that are potential free agents from those teams as well. So stay tuned for those videos. That's going to be fun. And before we move on, because we can sit here for hours going through every top free agent available and why we should sign them and why it makes sense, how much money they could potentially get and things like that. I plan on doing videos like that soon as well. Stay tuned for that, because I'm gonna do like my top 5 free agents, and then in each of those videos it'll be like the most expensive best option, but who's the best value option when it comes to like per dollar contract market value wise, who's like the best option because they're just the best player but you got to pay them the most money, but then who's the best value. So we're going to take a look at that, and we're also going to do the most underrated player that you can potentially get for really cheap that may end up balling out better for us than he did with his previous team. All kinds of, I'm gonna do that for different position groups, so stay tuned for that. But speaking of sleeper cheap options, Devin White for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know what happened. He just fell off a cliff. He went from being one of the best linebackers in the NFL to one of the worst. Maybe you want to look at him. I mean, there's so many options around here. This is a pretty nice free agency class, especially if you're looking for linebacker. And I mean, if franchise tags didn't exist, maybe if you're looking at safety, but there's a lot of really good receivers out there. There's plenty of edge rushers if you need one, especially if franchise tags don't exist. I mean, maybe Bobby Wagner follows his linebackers coach and John Glenn, who's now our assistant special teams coach. I mean, again, we can sit here all day. Maybe Tony Pollard follows. I've already done a full breakdown of video just specifically on Noah Fant and why he would make a lot of sense for it. You also have Gabe Davis, wide receiver from the Buffalo Bills. I mean, right now his projected contract is a 1-year, $12 million prove-it deal with $8 million guaranteed. Would y'all be willing to do something like that? Or you even have Bryce Huff, like I briefly mentioned earlier, for the Jets. Maybe that could be a guy that, you know, if Brian Burns, Josh Allen franchise tag, he's arguably the next best guy probably available. And he's estimated to get a 3-year deal worth $17 million annually, which is like probably like $5 million less than what Josh Allen and Brian Burns are potentially going to get. So slightly cheaper, but maybe just as good, arguably, depending on who you ask. So maybe that's like the best value right there. A lot of options. But again, we will be here all day if we just sit here and dive into free agents, all of them that could potentially be great ideas for the Commanders. So instead of doing that, again, because I'm going to split those up into videos based on position groups. So stay tuned for that. Those are more fun videos that I'm working on. We're going to go ahead and keep it pushing. But also, I want to bring to y'all attention, don't sleep on players that may potentially get cut from other teams as well. Guys that aren't on these top NFL free agents available lists because they're not available yet. Because people didn't necessarily expect the Bears to release safety Eddie Jackson and offensive lineman Cody Whitehair necessarily. I mean, maybe some people saw it coming, especially Bears fans and analysts and reporters. But in general, most people around the NFL probably didn't necessarily expect that to happen. And I see why they did it. It was definitely some cap cuts because they saved roughly $32 million from releasing those two players. But teams are going to release players left and right, man. There are a lot of guys that aren't available yet that will be available. And so let's take a look at some of those. And again, Eddie Jackson, the safety from the Bears, maybe we want to look at that. You know, with him getting up there in age, maybe he'd be willing to take a little less money, especially compared to his previous contract. And then Cody Whitehair, I mean, that boy had a run block grade of 42.5 and a pass block grade of 55 last year. I don't know, man. He may be even worse than another ex-Bears guy in Charles Leno. I don't know about that one. But then you had the Rams releasing veteran center Brian Allen. Maybe you want to bring him in. That was a random cut that if you look at the top free agents available list like a month ago, they didn't have a guy like Brian Allen on there. They didn't have Eddie Jackson or Cody Whitehair on there as well. So this is the point I'm trying to prove, that this free agency class could end up being even richer than it looks right now. I mean, if you're looking, Mitchell Trubisky got cut. I've already done a video explaining why we should not go get him. AJ McCarron is out there. You have Adrian Phillips, Lawrence Guy. I mean, if you're just looking at the transaction wire right now, names are getting added to it, man. Tracy Walker, the DB from the Lions. Chakoma Okafor, I think that's how you pronounce that, the tackle from the Steelers. I mean, not necessarily a great player, but a guy that's available. These guys are getting cut recently. All of these guys were cut in February. So again, when you're looking at a lot of these top free agents available lists that were done in January, maybe even done in December and November or something like that, these guys are not on it yet. So I just want to keep that, like, when you're looking around at guys that the Commanders could potentially snag in free agency, remember to go look at like the transaction wire as well and look at the guys that are getting released recently. Don't just look at Pro Football Focus's top 100 top free agents available or anything like that. So I'm just trying to make y'all a smarter fan base. That's what y'all come to me for. So I'm just doing my part. And then again, with players getting cut for one reason or another, and most of the time it's usually going to be cap space reasons, like teams struggling to get under the cap space and to get into the positive and things like that. I mean, there's several reasons why players may get cut, but usually it's going to be because a team just simply can't afford them. I'm pretty sure in a cap space free world, Eddie Jackson would still be on the Bears right now. They didn't cut him because he's sorry. They just cut him because relative to his cap hit based on his contract, they felt like he wasn't good enough to demand that much of a cap hit. Again, all relative. In a cap space free league where there is no cap space and we can spend as much money as we want, Eddie Jackson, I'm very sure, is still on the Bears. Relativity is king, especially in the NFL. Just to further back my point from earlier in the video. So remember, when you're looking at the free agency class, probably be a few more guys that we potentially are looking at to sign. Because the Commanders wouldn't be doing their due diligence if they aren't already aware and looking around at other teams at who may potentially end up getting cut. Which takes me to Pro Football Focus again, because they did an article and basically broke down each team's biggest potential cut. Just again, based on relative, like how much money they would save compared to how much production they're expecting out of them. And they would prefer, instead of that production, to take those cap savings and spend that money elsewhere, because strategically with a cap space league, you got to be as efficient as possible. That $9 million you could save from cutting one person, if you can split that up and give it to $5 million to one guy, $4 million to another, and those two guys end up being more productive than the other guy, you win. That's the whole reason we're doing this. That's the whole odds and statistics and chances and relatively that we're playing right now. It's a really interesting game. That's why these guys get paid millions on millions of dollars to figure these things out. So going back to Pro Football Focus, they said for the Cardinals, tackle DJ Humphries could potentially get cut to save them $16 million worth of cap space. That sounds quite likely. Falcons are likely to cut Mike Hughes to save $3 million. Baltimore Ravens are likely to cut edge Tyus Bowers to save $5.5 million. And they also include how much dead cap they would still leave behind as well. But all we care about is the cap savings. Buffalo Bills, running back Naheem Hines to save $4.6 million, especially after my Georgia Bulldog, James Cook, overall throughout the season kind of balled out. He had some ugly moments, especially in the playoffs, but he balled out in general. Then Carolina Panthers may cut their kicker. I mean, maybe we want to look at him instead of bringing back Joey Sly. Eddie Pinheiro, they would save almost $2 million to cut him. Chicago Bears, they actually did a video saying why the Chicago Bears could potentially cut Cody Whitehair, and then it ended up happening. So that just further backs the point that, hey man, these guys that we're listing off, these names could potentially happen. Then Cincinnati Bengals safety Nick Scott could be cut for $2.3 million worth of cap space savings. Then the Cleveland Browns, they actually have them just taking a pay cut. But they have my Georgia dog, Nick Chubb, but instead of getting cut, they have it as a pay cut. Same thing with the Cowboys. Michael Gallup taking a pay cut as well, but not actually being cut and available for us to sign. Denver Broncos, they see Russell Wilson potentially being a post-June 1st cut, but don't do him like that. Please cut him like today. If you're going to move on from Russell Wilson and go get a quarterback, do right by him and get rid of him now so he has the best chance to land on a good team and a good situation for him. The Detroit Lions, they just straight up said, we can't even bring up a guy that would make sense for them to cut. There's nobody on their roster that has enough of a cap hit that value-wise isn't going to outperform that cap hit for us to eventually even include in cap cut. So I appreciate Pro Football Focus for not focusing it and just throwing a name out there. They actually are really thinking about this. So I take this list pretty seriously. Green Bay Packers tackle David Bakhtiari. Time is up potentially. They could save $21 million from cutting him. Imagine what you could do with that $21 million in free agency, and maybe you can draft his replacement on a much cheaper rookie deal to come in and be your tackle. I can see why some people wouldn't want to, especially with Jordan Love looking like he's that guy right now. Maybe you don't want to get rid of a guy that's that great at protecting them, but if you could potentially get a guy like that in the draft, you never know. Then Houston Texans safety MJ Stewart could save $4 million there. Indianapolis Colts tight end Mo Alley Cox could save $6 million. Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Zay Jones could save $4.1 million, but that's so much dead cap that that may not be worth it. Kansas City Chiefs Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you can save $12 million. And whew, I'd be surprised if the Chiefs don't do that, because I don't remember him contributing much to this playoff run, the Super Bowl run that they had. Maybe I'm tripping, but whew. Hunter Renfrow from the Raiders. New regime, technically. Antonio Pierce taking over as head coach after being interim head coach, and he brought in some different guys to be like offensive coordinator and things like that. They could cut Hunter Renfrow and save $8.2 million. Really interesting. Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams. They could save $20 million by cutting him. And they're ugly in cap space. Aren't the Chargers in the negatives? Yeah, they're in the negatives. They probably have to cut them even if they don't want to. You got to keep in mind that when we're talking about a lot of these cap cuts, a lot of these teams it may not even be like a value thing. Like I said, relativity and all of that type of stuff. How much they're eating up cap space and how much you expect them to be productive. Maybe that doesn't match for some of these, but some of these, the team may absolutely love the player, but they're just so deep in the negatives of cap space that they have no choice but to cut the guys that are eating up the most cap space, even though they don't want to, even though it's not a value thing. They just kind of have to, and that kind of sucks. Then they had Rams center Brian Allen as a potential cap cut, and guess what happened? He got cut. That saved them $5 million. I mean, Pro Football Focus is predicting a lot of these, so take these names seriously. That's why I'm reading each and every one. Edge Emmanuel Ogbah for the Dolphins. They could save almost $14 million worth of cap space to cut them. Then they have safety Harrison Smith for the Vikings taking a pay cut, so not being available for us, so we're going to move past that. They have the New England Patriots potentially cutting the cornerback J.C. Jackson to save $4.4 million. Really interesting. Hey, man, I mean, granted, that was a Bill Belichick thing, but anytime a player, especially like a corner, had a contract coming up and was going to demand a lot of money, he was like, oh, yeah, you can go. We'll just get another guy that could do the same thing. And then they already drafted Christian Gonzalez to be the replacement for J.C. Jackson. J.C. Jackson was the replacement for somebody else. I forgot his name right now, slipping, from the Chargers, I believe. And then that guy was the replacement for, I think, Stephon Gilmore. And the Patriots just keep doing this thing. I mean, granted, Bill Belichick is no longer the head coach, so we'll see if Gerard Mayo wants to do the same thing to keep that trend going. But the Patriots do not pay their guys, man. Once that contract comes up, oh, yeah, you can walk. We'll just draft the replacement. They could do the same thing as you, but cheaper. I respect it, man. Hey, shouts out to them. But yeah, the Patriots potentially cutting cornerback J.C. Jackson to save $14.4 million. Safety Marcus May from the Saints, they're predicting him to be a post June 1st cut, which would save them $7.3 million. And of course, the reason that some people oppose June 1st cuts, like they predict Russell Wilson to be, even though I hope not, I hope they do better by him. They already did him dirty. Don't do him that dirty. Go ahead and release him sooner than that. But you do a post June 1st cut because you save way more cap space that wise, but it's give or take, because if you wait that long, then that $7.3 million you don't have available when free agency starts, so you have to wait till after the draft to make your moves. And this is why I say that third wave of free agency gets serious, y'all. There's still some free agency moves that can be made after the draft. Remember, I believe we signed Josh Norman to a huge contract after the draft. Just because free agency has happened, it's already been a couple of months and the dust has settled, and then we're going into the draft, doesn't mean that after the draft there won't be any more big signings. And a guy like Marcus May, Pro Football Focus is potentially projecting him to be available after the draft because of how much money the Saints could save by waiting to cut him until June 1st, just to put that out there. Then Giants guard Mark Glowinski, interesting, they could save $6 million there. Tight end CJ Uzomah from the Jets, I forgot he was on the Jets. I thought he was still on the Bengals. That shows you how much I know. I don't even know why y'all are watching my videos. To save $5.3 million worth of cap space. Philadelphia Eagles could cut cornerback Avonte Maddox post June 1st cut to save $7 million. Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Allen Robinson II. And man, how the mighty have fallen, bro. I mean, a few years ago, I would have never thought Allen Robinson would be getting passed around like this to save $10 million. And I'm pretty sure the Steelers do that. Allen Robinson cut him to save $10 million. Boy, they better do that today. I mean, I love Allen Robinson and all, but boy, $10 million worth of savings? San Francisco 49ers could potentially cut cornerback Isaiah Oliver to save $2.4 million. Maybe we want to consider getting him for the cheap. Seattle Seahawks could cut Jamal Adams post June 1st to save over $17 million. That's interesting right there. I know it's a new regime and all, but Jamal Adams cutting him. But at the same time, he may not, value-wise, relatively, may not be worth the money he's demanding. Because he would leave behind a $12.4 million dead cap type of hit. But he would ultimately, in cap savings, give them an additional $16.5 million back. So basically, he's eating them up for about $27 million, but they could get back 16.5 of that if they cut him post June 1st. We'll see how that goes. I don't know how confident I am in that one, but then again, it is a new regime. Mike McDonald's probably like, yeah, I don't need a Jamal Adams that's not the same I used to be, injury prone type of guy. We can move on from him. Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Russell Gage, $6.5 million worth of cap space. Maybe we want to look at him. Tackle Andre Dillard, potentially taking a pay cut for the Titans, so not available. And then the Washington Commanders, they just put N/A. Just like the Detroit Lions, they just don't see any potential moves that can make sense for us to cut. Like I brought up, Logan Thomas and Charles Leno makes sense, but the reason that I'm pretty sure they didn't bring it up is because if you cut Charles Leno in free agency in March, you better have a great plan as to how you're going to replace him in the draft, and you're more than likely taking quarterback number 2 overall. So do you want to risk that? I feel like if Charles Leno gets cut, it probably will be after the draft, because you don't want to cut him before the draft, and then we get to the draft and Troy Fautanu and all of these tackles that we're hoping falls to our second round pick are not available in the second round. They all get taken somewhere late first, and now we're left with no tackle to replace Charles Leno in the draft, and now we're scrambling and struggling. Keep Charles Leno just in case until after the draft. Then if you get a Troy Fautanu or somebody later in the draft, some random guy ends up falling, maybe like a JC Latham or something like that, somehow we take quarterback at number 2 and still land a franchise left tackle, then you can cut Charles Leno. But don't cut him prematurely before the draft. We have the most cap space in the NFL already. It's not even worth that risk, to be honest with you. Just go ahead and say, but Logan Thomas, that's a guy you could cut before the draft if you really want to, because I can see us being aggressive and going to go get like a Dalton Schultz or a Noah Fant. So I can see him getting cut before the draft, but I don't see Charles Leno getting cut before the draft unless they just have this foolproof plan. They have a crystal ball to where they can look into the future and know for a fact that they're going to be able to get a replacement for Charles Leno. Because I know a lot of people hate Charles Leno, but he's not the worst there is. You could do much worse, and I promise you, we cut him, a lot of us are going to regret it if we don't draft his replacement immediately within one of our first 2 picks. I'm just warning y'all now. I mean, but you never know. Maybe we trade back and we take Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt, and then this is not even a discussion. But again, that Charles Leno cut, man, prematurely before the draft, a little risky. That's a little frisky. That's a little scary for me, man. That's a little too bold for my taste. But Pro Football Focus said the Commanders got ahead of a bunch of moves with the new regime truly starting from scratch in some ways. Free agency is expected to be very busy for Washington, followed by the number 2 overall pick, getting the festivities started come the draft. So this is another source that's basically saying, who wrote this article? This was written by, this is Brad Spielberger. Oh, okay, never mind. Makes sense. So again, Brad Spielberger basically backs up his claim that the Washington Commanders will be the biggest spenders potentially in free agency, and I loved it. That's music to my ears. I'm excited. Let's get it. I don't necessarily know if that's the smartest thing to do. I don't know if that's the most likely thing that's going to happen with Adam Peters and these guys considering this potentially like a rebuild, but maybe they just want to turn this thing around immediately and be like the Texans, number 2 overall pick, take your franchise quarterback, win a division, win a playoff game. With that blueprint already there that was shown to us last year, maybe Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have that mindset, and maybe we do go into free agency as big spenders and we try to turn this team around immediately. Even though the reason I push back against that is, first of all, because this is considered a rebuild, but even more specifically, Joe Witt Jr. in his press conference said that he wants to come in and see what current Commanders players like Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin, Percy Butler, Derek Forrest, Jamin Davis can do with their coaching. They feel like it was more so of a coaching era last year with a lot of our players not being as good as we hoped, especially playing up to their draft pick value. They feel like it was more so the coaches than the players. So they kind of want to get their chance to come in, coach these guys up, and then see what we need from there. So they may not jump the gun and get too money happy, spending happy in free agency before they get the chance to see if it was Emmanuel Forbes or if it was Brent Visselmeyer, Jack Del Rio, and Ron Rivera. If it was Jamin Davis or if it was Jack Del Rio, Ron Rivera, and our linebackers coach name is slipping my mind right now from last year. But they're basically, Joe Wood Jr. is saying that the mentality of him and Dan Quinn that they have is that we want to come in and coach these guys up to see if it's truly them. So right now, they're basically, I'm saying, they're not even really solidified and absolutely sure what our real team needs are. Because a lot of us feel like we need corner, but Joe Wood Jr. and them are saying, hey, wait, don't jump the gun. Maybe when we coach these guys up, we don't need corner, is what they're saying. Now, edge rusher is obvious. You need to go get edge rusher regardless of how well you can develop. You can't develop KJ Henry and Andre Jones and that's it as your edge rushers next year. That can't be life. I mean, granted, you can re-sign James Smith-Williams in case 2, but even then, that's still not good enough. It doesn't matter how well you coach. You could be a genius. You could be the smartest coach of all time. You can't get too much greatness out of those guys, I believe. So you still need to address edge rush. You can jump the gun on that, but like cornerback, you may want to wait. We'll see. Linebacker, you may want to go ahead and jump the gun on that one too, man, because Jamin Davis, IR, and legal trouble, and then no other linebackers on roster that actually contributed to any regular season games last year. We got Cody Barton, David Mayo, who I really hope we don't bring back, and even Khaleke Hudson are all unrestricted free agents. Just as much of a chance to sign with another team as they are the Commanders. So, yeah, we have a huge hole there. But when it comes to offensive line and corner, they're probably like, yeah, let me wait and see. Let's get to these guys, coach them up, and see if it's really them or if it was the coaching that they were receiving last year. So I'm saying all that to say that we may be a little bit more reserved in free agency than some people expect just because of that. Joe Wood Jr. said that out of his mouth. But then again, on my end, maybe I'm just being glass half full. Maybe I'm just Mr. Optimism. But I really think from our end, there are reasons as to why we may actually just go all in on this free agency. Maybe they just watch enough tape from here up until free agency takes place and they're like, yeah, we probably should go get a better corner. Yeah, we should probably go get a better safety. We need a better edge rusher. Maybe we should go get this receiver even before they get a chance to get these guys in the building with them to coach them up, teach them up, and all of that type of stuff. Because Joe Wood Jr. even said they're changing the fundamentals. Like, we're going to teach you how to play corner the way we want you to play corner. It's not only we're going to teach you to be better, we're going to teach you to play completely differently than like technique, mechanics, footwork, hand usage, where your eyes are. They're going to teach people to play a completely different type of play style. So I'm intrigued to see, honestly, in my opinion, how a guy like Emmanuel Forbes and Jamin Davis looks under those conditions. Do they look like first round picks then? Potentially, yes. I mean, Joe Wood Jr. even said it himself. The Cowboys were very interested in potentially drafting Emmanuel Forbes, but then the Commanders took him. So they clearly have a plan for him. They clearly feel like he fits what they want to do on defense. So I'm really interested in seeing how that goes. Because I feel like if we didn't draft Emmanuel Forbes, they probably would have taken Emmanuel Forbes and then Deron Bland would have probably ended up on some other team. It's a crazy domino effect, but I'm saying all of that to say that Joe Wood Jr. likes Emmanuel Forbes. He apparently has a plan for him, so don't be surprised if Emmanuel Forbes finally looks like a first round pick under this coaching staff. It may not have been Emmanuel Forbes. A lot of it probably was on Emmanuel Forbes, but don't be surprised if he balls out under this new coaching staff. Again, which means that maybe we don't go corner heavy and happy in free agency. They may just take a year to wait, play it out, let's see what we have, and then maybe 2025 free agency they go crazy. We'll see though. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. I mean, this video is an hour long. I should have split this up. I ain't gonna lie, this should have been 2 30-minute videos. We could have split this definitely in half as far as topics go. But hey, man, I'm just having fun. I just love talking football. So if you're still here at the end of this video, hey man, I really appreciate you for making it this far, because most people probably won't. I hope that I'm making good content and giving y'all good enough information to where you would want to make it this far. By the way, I really appreciate y'all. I guess, I mean, with a video this long, you might as well treat it like a podcast and listen to this while you're cooking, while you potentially watching TV, playing a video game, driving to work, or you at work working. I appreciate y'all regardless, either way, man. And make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content. Let me know in the comment section, of course, how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Especially, do you agree or disagree with my points about why this salary cap increase actually doesn't help us as much as a lot of people think when you look at it from the surface. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points there. Also, the free agency signing, like, are the Commanders going to be big spenders? Let me know how you feel about a lot of the potential free agent names that we may go get. How do you feel about the potential cuts from other teams that we may potentially want to go look at? Let me know your list of guys that you're targeting, both already available and who could potentially be available after they potentially get cut by the NFL teams. Let me know all of that in the comment section. Of course, I'm gonna try my best to try to read and reply to as many comments as possible. I can't wait to get to that. Oh Lord, there you go. Pro Football Focus strikes again. The Dolphins have officially released linebacker Emmanuel Ogbah to save $13.7 million worth of cap space. Pro Football Focus has been spot on. Brad Spielberger, shouts out to him. He has been spot on with these predictions. So again, these are guys that are now available that weren't previously available until today / the past week. So free agency, when you're looking at the class, don't get a little underwhelmed. Don't think, yeah, it's not that great, because there's gonna potentially be a lot of players getting cut from other teams that will be available. So stay optimistic, stay excited. Let's see what happens. But of course, man, make sure you still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. So many video ideas to go. This was the one that, I mean, I was really excited about covering this, but I have some other video ideas that I'm even more excited about that I can't wait to get to. So stay tuned for those. Again, like I keep saying, man, I'm doing like 2 videos a day. So if you're not every day checking my channel to see what I've uploaded next, you're missing out, because I'm guaranteeing you at least 2 videos a day. I'm trying to get back to 3. So just keep coming back and checking, because there's probably a video that you haven't seen yet. So I appreciate y'all. Catch y'all later. I'm out.